Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. We're going to do chapter 2 today of the Timothy Snyder's new book, the graphic novel version of On Tyranny. Let's bring it up for a second here. We'll put it on the full screen for a second. Let's get it on the white background. There it is. All right, that's what the book looks like on the front cover. On Tyranny, Timothy Snyder. So Timothy Snyder is a noted professor of history from Yale University. He's got about about a dozen books out studying what's been going on out of Europe around authoritarian regimes for most of his career. He's quite an expert, and you frequently find him on various television shows, especially MSNBC, probably CNN. I don't watch CNN much, but more than likely I've seen him on MSNBC a number of times. I doubt if he's on Fox News. So the chapter I'm going to do is the chapter tonight. Let's bring it up here, chapter 2 on, let's see if we got it here. I'm sure I have it someplace. There it is. Okay. And the chapter is titled Defend Institutions. Defend Institutions. And what they're saying is it is institutions that help us to preserve decency. They need our help as well. They need our help as well. Couldn't have said it better if I tried. I've got a few things in back of me right here, a couple of posts from the newspaper and various New York, that's from the New York Review of Books a few years ago. The It Can Happen Here. Up above me, over here, is this recent article, Chilling Reminders of the Nazis' Blueprint for Murder. And way over here in the corner is the picture of Hitler practicing his speeches. And this was an interesting picture of Hitler that I found, where he didn't want this picture. He liked a lot of his stuff released, and he had his own personal photographer, but this particular picture he didn't like at all. He was a little bit too exaggerating in his mannerisms. If you watch Hitler give a speech, any pictures of him, you can see where he emulates a lot of these characteristics. But this was a little bit over the top. It made him look a little buffoonish, so he didn't like that, and he tried to get rid of that picture. Over here on my other side is this was a cover of This Week magazine about 2 years ago with Trump getting crowned king. And a little book over here, interesting book. This is a new explanation of the Holocaust, and it's the Hitler-Trump analogy. The Hitler-Trump analogy. Quite an interesting, also book by a Herbert Richardson. And way above my head, there's a picture of Donald's father, Donald and the mom and dad with their Klan outfits on. And this was a picture, they were looking into a story about whether Dad's father, Trump's father, Fred, actually got arrested with the Ku Klux Klan in 1927. There's some conflicting reports, but apparently somebody named Fred Trump at the same address in Jamaica States where they came from was arrested, but whether it was somebody else, they can't nail it down exactly that it was definitely him. Having said that, there was an article in one of the other New York newspapers, not the Times, another one of the New York newspapers, and not the Post either, that actually showed the father getting arrested in 1939 also with the Klan on their way to a Nazi rally. Having said all that, in the chapter here on Defend Institutions, and like I said, let's put that picture back up for a second. I think we have it here. Well, as soon as it comes up, we'll put it up. In the chapter, they're quoting from a Jewish newspaper in 1933, the beginning of 1933. Hitler has gotten into power, and he's looking to consolidate power. Well, a lot of the Jews in Germany thought, let's go along with this guy. He's not going to really do what he says he's going to do, right? And this is the actual quote from the editorial. We do not subscribe to the view that Mr. Hitler and his friends will implement the proposals that are circulating in the various Nazi newspapers. They will not suddenly deprive German Jews of their constitutional rights. and not enclose them in ghettos. Boy, that's the least of your worries. They can't do this because a number of critical factors hold power in check. The whole atmosphere in Europe, which is this democratic state here, tends towards ethical reflection upon one's better self. Boy, there's a mouthful. Ethical reflection upon one's better self. And they're referring to Hitler ethically reflecting upon his better self. As we talked about in the last show, Neville Chamberlain sort of felt the same way about Adolf Hitler, that he was going to even had a better self. Sometimes institutions are deprived of vitality and function and turn into simulations of what they once were. Sometimes the institutions that have been around for a long time, they suddenly turn into simulations of what they once were. I'm going to give us a really current day example of this in 1 second here. Some German Jews voted as the Nazi leaders wanted them to, in the hope that their gesture of loyalty would bind them to the new system. A lot of Jews were encouraged to vote for Hitler because they felt like if they remained loyal to Hitler, that he would be loyal back to them and they would bind them to the new system. When I look at these Trump rallies and I see blacks for Trump, about a half a dozen of them cleverly placed right in back of Donald, even cops for Trump cleverly placed in back of Donald. You got all these people with these T-shirts on right in back of Donald. Well, Donald never met a hero that he actually respected. He never really met too many people that he actually respected. Somebody with deep pockets is somebody he respects, authoritarians, etc. So the punchline of this whole chapter has got to do with institutions, and the main institution that jumped out at me this week was, well, let's get rid of this here, and we'll bring up where I saw this. This was on Bill Maher show. Bill Maher had Ira Glaser, not Ira Glass, but Ira Glaser, who was the former executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union, on Bill Maher this past week. Now, I watch Bill Maher whenever he's on, and I like about 75% of what comes out of Bill's mouth, and every so often he goes off the charts. I'm a big health food person. Anybody that knows me knows that, a huge health food person, but Bill cannot talk for 10 minutes without a problem in society without bringing up how it's the people that are obese and things like that, it's all their fault. It's all their fault, and if they only ate the right food, everything would be marvelous. He also has a real negative attitude towards the precautions being taken around the COVID, so I'm not crazy about that with him either. There's a few issues I've taken. He's also on HBO, which I have a whole story someday, I'll get into this, about how HBO got bought by a lot of organized crime many, many years ago. And Bill, in fact, did a whole series of shows about 13 years ago, interviewing people who were ex-mob bosses, ex-mob wives, and people that wrote about the mob. He did a whole 2-week series about this once. Anyway, Bill Maher, he really respects Ira Glaser, because Ira Glaser has been defending free speech for his whole career. And Bill is like the biggest star that he's ever had on the show. He's talking about him. And what he's talking about is how the ACLU has gotten totally compromised. And the quote we're going to get, let's get Ira off there and throw the quote up, because that's the relevant thing here. Okay, let's see. Here we go. We got it. We're on. Okay. And the quote is, you're reading it yourself along with me. I reject that we need, this is the new head of the American Civil Liberties Union. Ira is the former head. I reject the idea that we need an entrance exam on civil liberties to establish the bona fides needed to work here. I'll keep it up on the side for a minute. So basically what he's saying is he rejects the idea that we need somebody who believes in free speech to work for us to enforce free speech. I mean, if he hasn't turned logic on his head, That's what he's done. He's turned it's an Alice in Wonderland world that we live in. The wokeness that's out there, which was supposedly, this left-wing wokeness, and now is turned into this right-wing book banning. God knows they'll be burning books any day now. So the new head of the Civil Liberties Union doesn't necessarily believe that the person who they hire needs to believe in civil liberties in order to be on the show or to be on the payroll and defending other people. Now, the civil liberties, and here's a shot of Bill with Ira during the show. It was a really good interview. It was last week's show, and if you've got a chance, check it out. It's worthwhile. It's definitely worthwhile watching. The American Civil Liberties Union has been defending free speech. They defended the Nazis marching in Spokane, Illinois, back in the 70s. They have more cases of themselves defending people that they disagree with than people they agree with. But the point is they're defending the right of free speech. And this is the important element here. Before they take a case, they have to make sure, nowadays with their new rules in place, before they take a case, they have to make sure that the free speech doesn't offend or threaten other civil liberty values. Before they take a case, they have to make sure that it doesn't offend or threaten any other civil liberty values. If this isn't completely nuts, turned logic inside out, I don't know what is. The two other examples of this came up just today. I'll take down the Ira and Bill Maher there. And this was in today's New York Times from the 4th February. Why I've taken my podcast off Spotify. And there's been a whole big article this week about Joe Rogan, who I'm not terribly familiar with. This was written by Roxanne Gail, who is a noted author. I'm familiar with her name. She is also a contributing opinion writer, writes quite a bit. I've seen her name, but I'm not very familiar with her writing. But the point is, I believe we should expose to a multitude of interesting ideas and perspectives, including those that challenge our most fiercely held beliefs. So she's basically saying you ought to be able to say what you want to say in these institutions. If you don't hear what the other side's got to say, then you're going to wind up in a little bubble all on your own. She's not a firm believer in capitalism, and she says here, much like myself, but living in the world, participating in capitalism requires a moral compromise. I am not looking for purity. It doesn't exist. I'm trying to do the best I can. I couldn't agree anymore. I live just like all the rest of us in this capitalist society. A few stands I take is that I will not buy from Amazon. I generally don't stop I will not drag me into a Whole Food store unless I have to get there for some one item. I will supported the natural food movement for the last 40 odd years here, and I would put most of my money into the Good Natural Food Store, which is solidly behind the organic food movement and the anti-GMO movement. So I think where you put your money within the capitalist system is really, really important. More important than a lot of, you vote with your dollar. I really believe that. And during the article here, she talks about the difference between censoring things and curation. So in other words, you can't yell fire in a theater. You can't yell fire in a theater. I also don't believe, I believe that Fox News ought not to be allowed to be called Fox News because they're not news. They're all opinion. And they were an outgrowth of this whole Powell memo looking to discredit voices that were against capitalism as it was viewed in the 60s. And I've said a few times here, capitalism, our democracy is now, it's not a democratic capitalism, it's capitalist democracy. The capitalism has subsumed the democracy. We had a shaky democracy to start with, and the capitalism has subsumed it, so it's not democratic capitalism. There's nothing democratic about capitalism at all. It's capitalist democracy. It's the capitalism that's running the democratic system. Look at the lobbyists. Look at the money involved here. If I went out and went to run for something, believe me, I would never have even close to enough money, never mind. Okay, she ends the story by saying, I'm not trying to impede anyone's freedom to speak. I'd like to continue to proudly encourage misinformation and bigotry to vast audiences. Joe Rogan and others like him can continue to proudly encourage the misinformation and bigotry. They will be rewarded for their efforts. The platform sharing these rewards can continue to look the other way, but today at least I won't. So she's saying he can be on the air, he can be saying what he wants to say, but she's not going to participate in the platforms that are supporting him. Couldn't agree. That's exactly what I'm saying about Whole Food and about especially Whole Food. I have more against Whole Food than I do about Safeway, because Safeway doesn't pretend to be what they're not. They're a commercial business. That's what they do. When you get up to the counter there and you get by the checkout counter, you don't exactly find East-West Journal or Mindful magazine. What you find is a lot of crap and sensational magazines, and not much depth to the magazines that are pouring all over the counters over there. The other interesting article that jumped out at me today that had to do a little bit with the same topic here is Gail Collins today. Nobody ever said democracy came cheap. And what she's talking about is she's on the mailing list from Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump does not like Gail Collins. She's an editorialist, writes for the New York Times regularly. He does not like her. He said he doesn't like her to her face. She's on his mailing list. She gets these letters from him regularly trying to raise money, calling her his friend. Well, like she said, they're not friends. But what she says she wants to do is she wants to support good people who are actually running for office. And the good person she mentions is John Fetterman, who's a Democratic lieutenant governor, I believe, in Pennsylvania, and he's running for the Senate seat that's currently being held by Pat Toomey. So she's going to donate to him because she sees him as an institution worth defending. I see the American Civil Liberties Union as an institution worth defending. I will send them a letter. I will send them a letter. I will talk about what I see is going on based on what Ira Glaser said. And either I will cancel my subscription if they don't respond or don't say that they're going to do something positive about it. We have a subscription. I get the magazine in. I believe it comes in quarterly. And I don't have any copies around. I don't save it. It's not a saver for me. And I save a tremendous amount of paper. But it is an institution I totally believe in. I believe I'm defending both sides. So that's the whole message here. The whole message here was, and this was the punchline at the end of the introduction here. Choose an institution you care about, a court, a newspaper, a law, a labor union, and take its side. A newspaper. I also get a subscription. I get a few subscriptions to a lot of papers, and I feel like having the subscription to a lot of progressive material helps support them. I also generally read their front editorial page to make sure we're still on the same page. Jim Hightower, for instance, great newsletter to get. I don't have one with me right now. I have a copy upstairs. So that's the main takeaway from this whole show. I'm going to run one more little line at you. On this one article back here, It Can Happen Here, these were two books that they were talking about that were in the New York Review of Books. And in it on page 2, they're talking about the top book there, that there's wide talk about a democratic recession happening on the planet. And they're specifically talking about Turkey, Poland, Hungary, the Philippines, how these autocrats have risen to power in these countries, never mind Putin over there in Russia. Donald Trump may not be sufficient. Now, this is a few years ago. This may go back even 4 or 5 years. Well, no, it was the early part of the Trump administration. Donald Trump may not be sufficiently committed to constitutional principles of democratic government. Are you kidding me? Donald Trump may not be sufficiently committed to constitutional principles of a democratic government. You think? You think he's not committed to any principles? He's a gangster, autocrat, fascist. It talked about the problem with Nazism was so horrifying that many people in a lot of nations can't imagine how authoritarianism can get a foothold. They didn't think it could happen in Germany. The parallels between us and Germany are so stark, it's just unbelievable in terms of them being technological, and Germans being technologically advanced during that time of the century, us being technologically advanced, what our educational attitudes are. A lot of things, a lot of similarities pointed out in this book here. A new explanation of the Holocaust, which I mentioned a minute ago, which, in fact, they've got Hitler with a Make America Great Again hat on. And this is by, like I said, Herbert Richardson. Herbert Richardson, Make America Great Again with a Trump hat on. The takeaway that got me, many accounts of the Nazi period depict a barely imaginable series of events. A nation gone mad. A nation gone mad. That makes it easy to take comfort in the thought that it can't happen here. So the nation's going mad, and we all think it can't happen here. I'm going to bring up one more. I think I have it here. Yeah, this was a quote I had from Anthony Fauci, who a lot of people think don't think much of. A lot of people think a lot of him. A lot of people don't think a lot of. Real controversial. Our society is really totally nuts. Our society is really totally nuts. Now, I put this up in the past a few times. I couldn't agree anymore today. If you just looked at what happened today in the papers, you've got there's a crack happening in the Republican Party, and it's been reported earlier this week. And there's this disagreement, especially when Trump came out with saying that he got the vaccine. That caused a big uproar around all his anti-vaxxers, because initially this guy is an anti-vaxxer. Then suddenly he realizes, well, maybe he better switch on that one. So now he gets shots, and he doesn't wear the face mask, but he's not as anti-vaxxing as he originally was a couple of years ago. So that's causing a bit of a fissure there. Pence just came out today. Now, Pence is nobody. He's another one. I would never hold him up as a shining example of an ethically moral person, and I have a lot of stories about the crap behind this guy and the connections behind Pence. But suddenly today, he comes out definitively saying that Trump is wrong and the election was won, and that he couldn't have overturned it, which has now got a good portion of the entrenched Republican Party censoring Liz Cheney and him and Kinzinger and a few other people. Now, the entrenched Republicans, the good news is that, and this was another interesting piece of news this week, the fundraising going on between the Republican anti-Trumpers and pro-Trumpers, well, the anti-Trumpers are actually raising more money than the pro-Trumpers. The anti-Trumpers running in Republican state offices and congressional districts are raising more money than the pro-Trumpers. There's a lot of pro-Trumpers out there, believe me. This little 30% is, I don't know exactly what the number is, but there's definitely a lot of them out there. A lot of people watch Fox News, which is, God knows, they're sort of the pro-Russian, anti-fax, fake news network. Okay, so check it out. We're going to do chapter 3 next week, but defend institutions was the chapter there. Find an institution that you believe in or you think has some possibilities of maintaining some legs, and put some energy into it. There's something you can do. People say to me, what can I do? I can't do anything. They throw their hands up. They don't know what to do. There's something you can do. Maybe it's your local newspaper. Local newspapers are really good. Local newspapers are super important, especially that they don't get taken over by these large chains. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's a politician. You may not like the politicians, but they're there right now. We haven't replaced the system yet with anything better. So it could be a labor union. Boy, that would be good, a labor union. I think we're down to pushing 10% of total labor union involvement in America today. There's more in the public sector unions than there are in the private sector unions. But when you average it out, it comes out to about 10%. This is shocking, shocking. It could be even a court. Now, I know people in my town here who have had disagreements with various people working in the court system. take a look at the institutions that are out there, realize that these things could disappear in no time. In 1933, when the German Jews published this essay, this article, this editorial, telling the people to support the Nazis, that they're not going to do this bad stuff to us. It took 1 year from then, for them to totally consolidate power, their power, and start to literally publicly humiliate and publicly oppress the Jewish community. In back of me, this article, chilling reminder, the Nazi blueprint for murder. And I guess I'm pushing the half hour. Today's newspaper also, the back of the financial section, had a amazing little article about this guy that just died, 95-year-old Holocaust survivor who sued the deniers, a lot of Holocaust deniers out there, which this article is about 2 days ago. Now, I wouldn't exactly say that the New York Times is on my side most of the time. In fact, they're not. They're behind our progressive issues continuously. They're way more supporting of capitalism per se than they are of progressivism, no doubt about it. Having said that, they are the paper of record, and what they do put out does reach everybody, and that's the main thing about it. It reaches everybody, and everybody gets a chance to comment upon it. And it's not a liberal rag, believe me. The picture that's here, there, the guy that survived this and just died the other day, is on this third rack way in the back with his head sticking up. The one in the middle here, right next to the wall here, is Elie Wiesel, who's the Nobel Prize winning laureate. I think he died about 4 years ago. He's on the second row. In that, they're in Buchenwald. And they were alive when the Allied forces came into Germany, and that's how they survived. But when you're reading this obituary, they're talking about the experience of coming there and smelling the burning flesh of children, of women, of people they knew. They knew what was going on. It didn't take a brain surgeon to figure out what was going on. And Elie Wiesel became an amazing defender of institutions over the years, and in a sense he forgave the people who oppressed him very, very graciously, in a very universally compassionate way, which always struck me. I don't have the exact quote, I couldn't find it, but I used to run around with it. He was a real humanitarian who literally forgave and had a tremendous amount of compassion for those people who were enforcing Hitler's concepts of genocide against the race. So, defend an institution, choose an institution you care about, and take its side. Peace, patience, persistence. We'll see you next week with Chapter 3.